Well, good evening, everybody. We're glad you joined us. My name, first of all, introduce myself, is Lance Wood. I'm the Science and Operations Officer at the National Weather Service office here in League City, Texas. I'm going to be kind of co-hosting this session, this Ask the Expert session, and we've got a lot of experts here for you. But I'm going to be co-hosting with Dan Riley. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan Riley, also with the National Weather Service, and we're going to go around and have everyone introduce themselves now. Nikia, would you like to start, Nikia?
Hi, I'm Nikia Bradley. I'm the Deputy Director for the Office of Emergency Management for the City of Houston. Glad to be with you tonight.
How about you, David?
All right, David Tillman, one of two chiefs here at KTRK TV, Chief Forecaster, and glad to be here as well.
Jackie?
I'm Jackie Miller with the Mayor's Office of Public Safety and Homeland Security, and happy to be here.
Jeff, how about you?
Jeff Lintner, meteorologist for Harris County and Director of Flood Operations for the Harris County Flood Control District.
Pablo?
Hi, how are you? So my name is Pablo Sanchez. I am the meteorologist from Telemundo, Houston. I've been here only from 3 months. I am coming from Dallas, but I am from Spain, so glad to be here. Sorry because my English probably is not the best one, but sorry about that.
Jim?
Hi, Dr. Jim Sieber, Fox 26 News Chief Meteorologist, and happy to be here. This is fun doing it this way. I guess the second year we get to do this online.
All right, thanks, Dr. Jim. Scott?
Hi, Scott DeFuria, Emergency Manager for Galveston County.
And last but not least, Mark?
Good evening. This is Mark Sloan. I am the Coordinator for Homeland Security and Emergency Management for Harris County. Glad to be here.
I want to say quickly for everyone that's dialed in, if you have a question, you want to type that into the chat box. So you should see a little chat icon there. Type your questions in if you have questions for the panel. Lance, you want to start us off?
Yeah, we can go ahead and start with a question. Let's see. Let's go with well, Dan, we'll have you answer maybe one here right off the bat. What is the difference between a hurricane watch and a hurricane warning? I know I get asked that a lot at the start of every season.
Yeah, the hurricane watch means there's the potential for hurricane force winds within about 48 hours. And then when we get within 36 hours, those hurricane force winds are likely somewhere within the watch area. And we're talking about sustained winds of 74 miles per hour or greater. And I should say, just to add real quick, the timeline is actually based on the arrival of tropical storm force winds. So it's hurricane force winds, but tropical storm force, when that's within 36 hours, you'll see those warnings raised.
Yeah, good answer. Let's go with a question that we also get about shelters when we have a hurricane approaching. So, will there be shelters open when a hurricane is coming? Let's go ahead and ask Mark that question and see what he has to say about shelters.
Well, as in Harris County and in most of our coastal communities, we're in the evacuation zone. So our intention is to get people away from the storm surge and out of our area. And we do not open shelters prior to landfall. So we look for people to leave our jurisdiction, and in some cases they may go as far inland to family and friends in Cy-Fair, but no, we do not open shelters prior to landfall in our coastal evacuation areas.
Scott, is that true as well for Galveston County? I guess even more so.
Yeah, Dan, echo what Mark was saying. Once again, we're trying to get everybody away from the danger zone. So we don't do, pre-landfall shelters here in the county. We want everybody to get inland and away from the danger.
All right. How about this question for Jim? Why did we have so many storms last year, Jim?
Well, that's a really good question, and we could write a 1,000-page book on it, and we'd probably still just be getting started. You know, everything kind of came together last year for a number of reasons. We had, warm temperatures of the waters. We didn't have an El Nino going on, and what an El Nino year typically does is send some stronger upper level winds into the Gulf and into the Caribbean and other areas, and that tends to slow down hurricanes. So the things that slow down hurricanes were present, and the things that help fire up hurricanes were. And so all those things kind of came together at the same time. So I always kind of joke around a little bit too with it, just the fact that, Mother Nature, just when we think we have things down, she just likes to screw with us and keep us on our toes. And that's also why I tell people, be prepared for the unprepared, for what you're not prepared for. That's typically what's going to happen. So we'll have a year where we have 30 named storms. And then this year, we have 10, but one comes to Houston. Obviously, it'd be a bad year for us. So all the conditions kind of came all together at the same time, and especially for our friends that live in Louisiana, because they had the most active hurricane season, far more than we did. We just had close calls for the most part.
Yeah, that's right.
So how about let's ask David there. How many storms you figure we're going to get this year, David?
You sure you don't want to ask a government employee that question there, Lance?
well, I can give you my thoughts after what you think, what you're thinking, what you're looking at.
I tell you what, I recall this time last year, the forecast for the season was just about the same as what it is this year. Yeah. The difference, I think, between last year and this year is, based on what I could tell, is that water temperatures aren't quite as warm this year as what they were last year. Last year, they were just extremely high, way above where they should be. This year, they're high. They're going to be higher than normal, but they're not quite as warm as last year. It still appears we're going to get the waves coming off the coast of Africa with high frequency. Those tropical waves typically move across and make it into the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico and can develop. And it still appears that we're in a situation where the wind shear is going to be low out there as well. So with all that being said, the official forecast from NOAA is calling for an above average season. I believe it's 13 to 20 named storms or tropical storms. About 7 of those becoming hurricanes and about 3 of those becoming major hurricanes. And I'm thinking it's probably going to be somewhere in there. If that forecast is a little off, we might go a little bit higher than that, but not expecting the incredible hurricane season that we had last year. And to piggyback what Jim said just a moment ago, it only takes one storm. So the forecast could be for a below average season. It could be for an above average season. If you don't get hit, you're lucky. If you do get hit, it's a terrible season.
Yeah, David, I couldn't have answered that any better. So that was a great, thorough answer. Great job.
Yeah, and realize you're going to get all the harder questions. So that's why we're the facilitators, so we could throw those at you.
It's tie off.
Now, we do have some questions that were submitted to us related to COVID and evacuation. Nikia, let me start with you and maybe get all the EMs to weigh in on this. How is COVID affecting things as far as evacuation and then sheltering as well? I realize you don't shelter as a coastal county, but any comments on that?
So I think last year we prepared very well for COVID, getting a lot of the PPE ready and available, from hand sanitizer to masks. Also preparing for folks to be able to line up, marking 6 feet apart for them to queue. Also, when they come up to the counter to register, having sneeze guards available as well. So we did a lot prep last year. We also got to test it out with 2 events last year, being Hurricane Laura, probably a very good exercise for us when we thought we were getting a direct hit. And then lastly, I would throw in as well, even in our EOC, we were practicing COVID, interactions of having wipe downs and making sure that people were wearing the proper PPE, even in our EOC. So I think COVID prepared us last year, and we're going to keep those same standards in place until further notice.
Thanks, Nakia. Anything to add, Mark or Scott, to that?
I can. FEMA has put out guidance that is specific to hurricane preparedness and what we should expect for non-congregate sheltering, trying to keep isolation and keep the public safe if we have to evacuate. And we are coordinating with our Red Cross partners along with FEMA in the event that a tropical storm or a hurricane were approaching us and we had to evacuate our coastline. So there's extensive plans through the state along with our federal partners, and each of us at the local level as emergency managers practice and understand the changes that we have made since last year prior to a pandemic impacting the entire globe. And we will do the best we can to make sure that our community and every resident that has to evacuate is taken care of. As Nakia said, it is something that we are very accustomed to now in terms of PPE and making sure that we understand the protocols are in place, especially for our evacuating communities that are receiving anyone that leaves our jurisdictions in San Antonio or Austin or Dallas are also well prepared to be able to handle our communities if we were needing to evacuate our coastline.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, kind of echoing, what they previously said, right? Securing the PPE, we have a better understanding of, what COVID is now. Last year, we're still playing catch up. There was a lot of learning curve, last year with it. So, being in a better position, plus the vaccinations, plus, natural antibodies that people have incurred through getting COVID-19, we're in a much better position, at this point, than where we were last year. And last year we did have evacuations, voluntary and mandatory evacuations in Galveston County. So we got to team together last year and identified COVID protocols, plus with the state and our sheltering partners, and kind of identifying how do we keep our residents safe. And we did really well, good job with that last year, and improving on it this year.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think a great question here for Mr. Lindner would be, are there any tools or websites for checking rainfall, status of river, bayous? I mean, that's probably applicable even right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had heavy rain over the last several weeks, and so the grounds are saturated, the creeks and bayous are high, and we'll be monitoring that into the weekend. But there's a couple websites that we certainly advise people to use. One is the Harris County Flood Warning System, harriscountyfws.org. And you can not only look at rain gauges and channel information inside Harris County, but also across the region. Fort Bend County, Galveston County, Waller County, Montgomery County, Brazoria County all have gauges also that we have on that website. And we have some cool tools on there to help point you toward the direction where we have the worst conditions with the channel status and where we might have flooding from the creeks and bayous, including inundation mapping, where you can actually see the footprint of the flooding from the creeks and the bayous. The other thing you can do is you can sign up to actually get alerts from those gauges sent to your cell phone. So if you're out in Fort Bend County or Brazoria County or Harris County and you have a gauge near you, you can actually have that gauge send you a text message or an email when certain criteria are met. So you have to go in there and set up an account and put in what you want. And then the other website, which is really good, kind of more of a regional approach, is the National Weather Service Advanced Hydrology page, and that gives you forecasts from the River Forecast Center on some of the rivers, so like the Brazos River, the Trinity River, the Colorado River, and also the current stages. And so, the combination of both of those websites really for the region give you a really good idea of what we're looking at with respect to flooding on the watersheds across the area.
Thanks, Jeff.
So, Pablo, you say you come most recently from Dallas. What's the biggest adjustment starting in the Houston market, would you say?
Can I respond in Spanish or I respond in English? I can respond in English. So
Okay.
likely, for example, in the event that we have a couple of days ago of a tornado warning. Normally in Dallas we have really big tornadoes, maybe EF4, EF2, EF3, and here most likely are spin ups. Most of them, so it's one of the most challenge that I am having. Also the flooding. Here I am, I just been living here in the Houston area the last 3 months, and it's raining a lot, likely in May, and you can go to the bayou, you can go to the river area, and you can see a lot of water. Maybe in Dallas we don't have, or we didn't have that kind of things, especially during the last part of the spring, near June, July. But this year is a little bit different because I think all Texas is seeing a lot of rain the last couple of weeks. So this part is the most challenging for me. Maybe how you control a tornado warning on TV in terms of how many minutes you have to wait on TV doing cuttings. Because in Dallas probably you can stay more than 2 hours or 3 hours or more than 4 hours covering a tornado warning. Here is more like on a spin up, maybe no more than 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and that's it.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. We do get those quick spin ups. Occasionally we get the long track tornadoes as well, like you see up in North Texas. We had one in Polk County last year. So that's a challenge for us also.
Yes.
Yeah, I think on this next question, we'll just open it up to any or all of our emergency managers. We always get asked this from people in Southeast Texas, how do I know if I should evacuate? When I might get into that situation? What would you recommend people asking that question as a storm approaches?
Hey, Lance, Scott. So signing up for mass notifications is definitely highly recommended. If you go onto our website, gcoem.org, for signing up for Galveston County mass notifications or any of the jurisdictions that have mass notification systems, this way you'll get a call, a text, email, letting you know that there's an evacuation order, and then also, based where you are in the county on that evacuation order. We evacuate from the coastline and then work our way north.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Anybody else? I know since Scott's in a coastal county there, so he's going to be under the gun a lot. Hopefully not this year, though, right? Go ahead, Mark. It looked like you wanted to say something.
I think it's important that if you're in the area, and this is new to you because you've moved here from other parts of Texas or from around the world or the country, is to learn your zip code and zip zone map. We try to evacuate the coastline. We want to evacuate our zones from the coast inland. And if you look at the zip zone maps, which all of our media partners will show and talk about, along with our National Weather Service partners, you can get to understand where you reside. You can look at it on the HGAC website. You can look at it on your emergency manager's website in Harris County. It's readyharris.org. And it's an interactive map. And you can then know if you are in a zip zone that needs to evacuate. We may call for all the zones based on the size of the storm and the surge, because life safety is our #1 priority. And that should be yours as well, to take care of yourself or your family and protect your property. And you need to understand what your risk and threat is. So learn where you live, and understand the proximity you are to the coast, and then put a plan in place so you know where to go.
And I'll just add to that in saying that just today we launched in partnership with readyharris.org accessible videos on evacuation assistance and evacuation zones. That is also a recorded message that you can find on the radio stations at HD Channel 4 on KUHF FM. And then also on KUHT TV, channel 8.5. And then lastly, they are on the readyharris.org/accessible videos. And that is offered in English and Spanish.
So let me just chime in here real quick, Lance, and make a distinction about something, because the last time most of us dealt with a significant tropical system here was during Harvey, and there was a lot of evacuation notices that went out for Harvey that had absolutely nothing to do with storm surge flooding, and we really evacuate for storm surge flooding. And so just because previously during Harvey your subdivision may have been asked to evacuate because of high water, because of Addicks Barker, Buffalo Bayou, or out in Fort Bend County, the levee improvement or the levee districts, that does not mean for the next hurricane that you should just automatically assume you're going to need to evacuate. The evacuation is really for the coastal areas, as Mark said, in those determined zip code zones. And just because you were asked to do this for Harvey and a big flood doesn't mean you're going to need to do it for the next hurricane.
Jeff, I couldn't agree with you more, because that was a post-landfall determination. And then we're going to take appropriate actions as local government for life safety after the storm makes landfall. And we do assessments. And as Harvey came in to the south and moved up, it became a flood event for us locally here on the upper part of the coast in Harris County.
One thing I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, post Allison, that impacted the Rita evacuation. Is that correct? Is that an analogy there? In other words, people that flooded from Allison felt they needed to evacuate for Rita. Is that true?
Probably to a little bit of some degree. I think there was probably more of an effect from Katrina a little bit earlier that year. And please understand, this area is not New Orleans. So, even with flooding rainfall and large storm surge, we're not going to sit in water for weeks and weeks here. So it's really, really important to listen to your local officials when it comes to evacuation decisions and evacuation recommendations. And it's also important to understand the impacts of the storm coming and not so much the impacts of what's happened in the past.
Got another question that's come in related to flood insurance, and I'll start this with Jeff Lidner. This person says they did not flood with Harvey. Do they need to get flood insurance, and how do they determine if they need flood insurance?
So the simple answer is yes. Everybody needs flood insurance. There's a lot of individuals who didn't flood during Harvey. Some of them flooded 2 years later during Tropical Storm Imelda up in the Aldine and Humboldt and Kingwood area. And so it just really depends a lot of times on where that heavy rain falls and if it's going to fall over your subdivision and your neighborhood. And every single storm is different. So you could have high water with one storm and absolutely no water with another storm. And so it's imperative that everybody has flood insurance here. Only about 30% of the residents in Harris County have flood insurance. So that leaves a large portion of our population not protected from rising floodwaters, and homeowners insurance does not cover flood damages. So like when we just went through the winter freeze and your pipes burst and you filed with your homeowners insurance and you got that fixed, that is different. That is different water. Rising water or floodwaters is not covered under the homeowners insurance policies. And so you have to have that separate flood policy. It takes 30 days for that policy to go into effect. And no policies are issued when there's a named storm in the Gulf of Mexico. So it is something you need to take care of now. And of course, we don't have to have a tropical storm or hurricane to have flooding. We've had flooding outside of hurricane season, absolutely nothing to do with tropical storms and hurricanes. And so this is a year-long investment that's really important. If you're outside of a floodplain, it's relatively inexpensive. You're talking $400 to $500 per month. A little bit more expensive if you're inside a floodplain. And the easiest way to determine if you're inside a floodplain, and really I think the question is, how much am I going to pay? Because everybody needs it. is to go to our Harris County Flood Control District website, and we have a tab called Flood Education Mapping Tool, and you can type in your address, and it'll show you what zone you're in. And so if it comes up and you're not in a flood zone, I hear so many people, I'm not in a flood zone, I've never flooded, I don't need flood insurance. I can't tell you the number of folks I've talked to that had that same mentality after the tax day storm, and then they flooded during Harvey or whatever storm. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the floodplains that you see on these maps are only showing flooding from the creeks and bayous. A lot of our structure flooding that happens here comes from our roadway systems. Our roadways are purposely designed to hold this excess water when we get these really intense rainfall rates. And occasionally the water will get into the homes just from the street drainage systems. And those are not in any sort of map floodplain. As a matter of fact, about 60% of the homes that flood in this county, every single storm, if you look at Allison, Harvey, Imelda, tax day, about 60% of the homes that flooded were not in a map floodplain. These are residents who are not required to have flood insurance. And this is why it's so important that everybody gets flood insurance here, because we are all susceptible with the flat terrain and the really high intense rainfall rates of flooding, even well away from a creek or bayou. Even if you're not even near one, you can have flooding issues. And so it's really, really important to get that flood insurance.
That's great information, Jeff. A quick follow-up is how does one get flood insurance? Mark, do you get that through your agent or online, or how does that work?
Now you can go through your agent, but it's going to be, they got to work with it's federally and funded through FEMA. So you can contact your agent, they can get you in touch with and process it, but it's a separate policy altogether.
So I just want to add to that really quickly. We also have where private insurance companies are now offering flood insurance as well. I live in a floodplain. Geico offered mine, so there are private insurances that are now offering flood insurance, so you should check with them as well. Additionally, if you're a renter, get rental insurance for your contents. There are a lot of renters out there and they lose their contents, while the homeowner might have had homeowner insurance that doesn't cover your contents as a renter. So make sure that you also are looking out for that as well to get rental insurance.
Thanks, Takia. Mark?
Yeah, I was going to say there was a question that came in about the Weather Expo on Saturday. Just so everybody knows, it was moved to the 12th, just because of weather expected this weekend. Pretty heavy rainfall is expected, so just want everybody to be aware of that. And we still have the chat open, so don't forget now's your chance to talk to the experts and click the chat button and ask your question. It can be anything weather related, really, or preparedness related. So ask away. One question I had too for our media partners is we always get asked about weather apps and which ones you might recommend or that you use. So we'll let our media partners weigh in on that.
Jim, go right ahead.
Oh, thanks. Thanks a lot, David. Appreciate that. We all have apps, and honestly, and I'm sure we all have the same issues where our management is telling us to push our apps. I just want people to have an app. I honestly don't. Okay, I'm going to get in trouble here. I don't care what app you have. I really don't. And everybody has different things that they like about their apps, and I have things that I like about ours. The thing is to be informed. And honestly, in a storm situation, most people, when they lose power, the only way you're going to get your information is on your phone. So you should definitely make sure you have the way to charge your phone. Whether, I don't care even how you do that, but anything that you can do to keep that phone charged, to have an app that you get that information. And the important things that I think that you need to have is, one, it automatically gives you the watches and the warnings coming in from our partners with the National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center, so that you get those immediately. Two, I think you need to be able to have some type of radar on there so you can see it in where your house is, where you live, where your home is. So that you can also manage your own risks. And then all the other kinds of things that you can add on there. There's all kinds of stuff. But I think those are the important things, that you know what's going to happen and how you can be better prepared.
Yeah, thanks, Dr.
And
Jim.
one-
And I'm
also
glad
the
you
second
explained
thing,
it.
too. I think one of the coolest things that ever happened was when the National Weather Service stopped putting out warnings for entire counties and start putting out warnings for parts of counties. And then they allowed that information to be used in these apps in such a way that if you're within that polygon, these warnings that go out, that app that you have will notify you. And if you're not in that polygon, it won't notify you. So you're not getting bothered by a warning that, in the case of some of the large counties that we have here in Southeast Texas, that might be, 20 miles away from you. So I think it's a very useful tool to have an app that does that very thing. And I always like when I get out of town, I'm someplace out of town, and all of a sudden my app starts going off, and it's because there's a storm where I'm located, not just where I live. And I just really think that's a cool thing that we can do that.
Yeah, that's a good point, David. Pablo, you have any recommendations for getting weather information? And I'm fine with you with giving it in Spanish, because I'm sure we may have some Spanish listeners that could be tuning in. I think you might be muted there, Pablo.
Sorry. I also was talking, the Texas City storms, and I am doing both things. So yes, I am not going to make any promotion for free. I just kidding. But right now in the market, we have a lot of nice mobile apps. For example, Radar Scope, if the people wants to download, is really nice. For example, for all the people to see where are the stronger rain, for example. Also, you can see web pages like Tropical Tidbit. Is really awesome. All the content that you can find on there. Also, Twitter. People like Jeffrey, in that case, from Flood Control, puts a lot of interesting information. You have a lot of people on Twitter. You have a lot of web pages, but those are my favorites. Also, the National Weather Service for sure. But yes, son esas las que pueden generar mayor interés. Sorry for this one.
Thanks, Pablo. Appreciate it. Now, you guys realize I just gave you a softball there, right? On that question, right? No, that was just awesome information. I'm glad you guys expanded it from just weather apps to like all weather information, because we all want people to get the information they need and to do the right thing. One comment I always make going into hurricane season is, these are your trusted sources here, the people that you're seeing here, other media partners that we have. Don't just believe everything on social media, and make sure you're getting, not hearsay information. As a meteorologist, I'll be out and I hear a lot of stuff being passed on second and third hand. Like, I'll be getting my oil changed and I'll hear somebody, they say that this is coming here, not even specific of what, but it's something bad and it's something with weather. And, you need to go to a trusted source, especially when we're talking about the hurricane season and a hurricane threat, because it's a serious threat, as I know many of you know. Just wanted to remind you, because we've seen an increase in just a lot of bad information that gets propagated. It's basically a lot of rumors. So just make sure you know who you're getting your information from, and it's a trusted source.
Yeah, and I want to make a quick comment. All the people you see on the panel here and others that aren't on the panel really work well together. The Houston market has been tested so many times, and we all have the same goal, and that is keeping everybody safe. So just want to make that comment. We do have a question more for the EMCs related to reimbursements from FEMA. Basically, how does that process work, and how much time does it take after a disaster to get reimbursed, and how much do people get reimbursed? I know it's a fairly complicated question, but which EMC would like to jump in on that?
Well, all right, I'll jump in. As individuals, when you file a claim with FEMA, it can take a little while because there's a lot of paperwork and there's a lot of federal programs that you might be eligible for, but you have to be very careful not to over apply, because sometimes those will affect your eligibility in some of the other grant programs. So there are many ways in which businesses, along with individuals, might be able to receive federal funding through Small Business Administration grants and loans. But then there's also individual assistance, in which if we have a presidentially declared disaster, we will ask FEMA to come in, and then people will do this virtually online as we try to bring in disaster recovery centers based on FEMA's ability and availability to come in during a COVID type event. But it isn't going to be a way in which makes you whole. That's why insurance, flood insurance, is crucial for you to get your home fixed. Insurance itself is much more effective, it's faster, it's more efficient, and you'll be back living in your home much sooner than if you wait or rely on the federal government to try to get you back to a new state of normal, because it will not be anywhere near what you had prior to the storm. I can't emphasize that enough. There's a maximum threshold, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's not a lot. The money from the federal government that FEMA and the insurance program would grant you, but your insurance policy is what helps you as individual homeowners and as businesses get back to a new state of normal.
And I would piggyback off of that and think of FEMA as like gap insurance for your car. You have car insurance, and sometimes there's a little bit more that's left over to what you owe on the loan, and that gap insurance covers it. Think of FEMA more as that, as more of a gap insurance, that my insurance will cover most of it. If there is a little extra, maybe that's where they come in, or my insurance covered all of it. And I'm getting back to that normal that Mark was just speaking of. But yeah, I agree that it can be somewhat take a little bit longer than normal. There have been a lot of storms, a lot of named storms over multiple locations. If we think back to Harvey, there was Harvey, Maria, Irma. That was quite a bit of people putting in claims. And so I'm sure during that time it was slower than normal for that to be able to get the claims out to the people who needed it. Same thing with the winter storm. The whole state of Texas was coming through for damages. So again, that was such a large storm, and them being able to try to get assistance, out probably was difficult. So I agree. Let's focus on being able to find that insurance, and also making sure that that's not your go-to if you're looking for damage reimbursements. And don't forget about the SBA. The SBA, the Small Business Association, also gives out loans and funding as well for damages. Even if it is in a presidentially declared disaster, the SBA still can help even in smaller disasters, and being able to provide funding to get your home fixed.
Yeah, and I like to just echo kind of what Mark and Nakia were talking about. It's not going to be a quick process, and don't expect FEMA to remodel your house. That's definitely not a good insurance policy to have. And I know we've been talking a lot about flood insurance, but it's also just a good time to check on your wind insurance, general insurance, have those conversations with, your insurance agents, see what they cover and what kind of coverage you have. So now's the time to do that, before we have anything in the Gulf.
It's great information. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and we did have a question coming in here about Harris County being denied in the funds. I guess it's disbursement maybe there for flood planning. Do we have a backup?
Yeah, I assume that has to do with what's been in the news recently with the General Land Office and all of that type of stuff. And so, the Flood Control District has been working with various state and federal agencies for a while to determine funding streams that could come down to assist and add additional funding on top of the bond funding that was passed back in 2018. And so just to be clear, that $2.5 billion in bond money that was passed in 2018 by voters is still there. It is available. We have that money. The hope was that additional federal funding would come down to enhance that bond money, so you would get more money on top of the 2.5 billion. And that is where things have kind of gone a little bit sideways a little bit, and some of that's because there's been so many disasters across the United States. You're talking about Irma and Maria. You had wildfires out in the west, and then we've had other hurricanes, Hurricane Michael, and of course the hurricane season last year. And so it's stretching those dollars very, very thin. And so there are planning efforts and communications and talks going on right now to hopefully develop additional funding streams to bring mitigation efforts here to Harris County. One thing I'll just put out there, 2.5 billion in the bond has been passed, and we're working on those projects now. The flood control district is. Even if we were to get an additional, say, $1 billion or $2 billion, just to put this into context and perspective, to bring 100-year flood protection to Harris County, that means bringing the entire 100-year floodplain inside of all the creeks and bayous, is about a $40 billion effort. And so it's an extraordinarily expensive effort with respect to infrastructure, flood risk reduction projects, property acquisition and home buyout. That's removing those homes and structures that are really low in the floodplains. They're going to flood regardless if projects are put into place. And so when you start talking about all that, this is a very, very long-term effort. And as we've seen here, other things happen. The winter storm happened, and already, money is needed to be diverted to the winter storm effort. We still have the coastal barrier situation. Is that going to get funded and built? And so you have all these competing streams, competing projects, if you will, out there for funding. But we have to remember that flooding is our natural and number one threat here, and it's something you have to deal with on the long term. These solutions are not going to happen overnight, and it can take years, and in some cases decades, to build some of these projects.
Good question. Jeff mentioned the winter storm. For anyone on the panel, really, any lessons learned from this winter storm and any assurance that we won't see this again?
No, because it can happen. And it's like saying that, we're not going to get hit with a tropical storm this year because it's happened so many times in the past. If we're not prepared for weather, either deep freezes, as we've seen, or a tropical event, then we're not really understanding what our true risk and threats are here on the Gulf Coast of Texas. So yes, there are many lessons that people did learn. In our office, we did have a conversation about what would happen with a potential of an ice storm and the impacts on the power grid, the impacts on our infrastructure, water, sanitary sewer, are very similar to what may happen with a Category 5 hurricane. We're going to have debris on our roadways. We won't have mobility. We're going to lose power. We will have, without power, the ability to potentially not be able to have water at our homes. So instead of deep freezing, we're going to have, typically after a tropical storm impacts our area, we go into high heat and humidity. So the difference and the lessons that we learned is that we're vulnerable to a lot of different things. And I think everybody should take that to heart when they prepare themselves, their family, and their property to understand the true risks and threats that exist all around the entire year, all 12 months.
One thing I'll add is the forecasts were really, really good leading up to the winter storm. I mean, we were looking 5-7 days out, and we knew, we didn't know how much ice or snow we might get, but we knew it was going to get really cold. And I think one thing's important is that a lot of time in the noise, and you kind of hear where the meteorologists are using some of these big words like, this is a dangerous event, this is potentially a catastrophic event. And when you start hearing those words from us, from these folks on this panel and those trusted sources, you need to be taking it seriously, and you need to understand that we don't utilize that language lightly. And so when we're saying that this is something that usually we have high confidence it's going to happen, and second, it's going to be impactful, and it's going to be impactful for a lot of people. And so we're not going to use that language for your everyday 32-degree freeze. But when we're starting to deal with something like we dealt with the winter storm, or a very significant flood, or a significant hurricane event, that language will be utilized, and that's kind of your cue that this is a serious thing and you need to take it seriously.
Hey, can I jump in for a second?
Sure, go ahead, Dr. Jim.
I don't give hurricane talks anymore. I stopped giving hurricane talks a long time ago. I give preparedness talks. And one of the things that I tell people is that being prepared and getting prepared is not an event. It's a lifestyle. And this past year should be a perfect example. I mean, we haven't even talked about COVID. We had lines at the stores when nobody, that happened overnight. So we need to be prepared for the unpreparable. That things are going to happen, whether they're storm related, weather related, social related, sickness related. Stuff is going to happen and will continue to happen. And by taking actions now and on a regular basis, then how you're going to come out on the end of that situation is a lot of it's already predetermined, because the way you've set yourself up so that you're reacting quickly and not waiting for something to happen and then acting at that point. So being prepared is something for all of us. In fact, including me, after Harvey, I've made some significant changes on the preparedness levels for my family. And I thought I was prepared. And so we just continually have to be upping our games in that whole scenario, because I promise you, everything we've just talked about today is going to happen again. And other things are going to happen that we haven't even thought of yet that will surprise all of us. But if you're prepared, then you just put your preparation plan into action.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Go ahead, Nikki.
No, I was going to say, Scott, do you want to go first?
You go, Nikki.
Okay. I was going to say, just as to piggyback off of that, don't just prepare, but also actually practice it. Often we make these plans and people don't practice the plan. And then when the emergency comes, it's kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do. Where's that kid at again? That type of thing. Even myself, we practice it all the time. When I stay at a hotel, I walk all the way to the end of the hall and open the exit door. So I'm practicing in case I need to evacuate. And even preparedness kits. I have a kit in my car. I got stuck one time on a highway for 7 hours. I was so thankful for my kit in the car with power bars and something to drink. So he's exactly right. We run into these everyday situations all the time, and those kits and those preparedness items can be very helpful.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's absolutely right. Instead of looking at it as, just hurricane talks, I think it's a great way to put it. It's looking at, just emergency and disaster preparedness. We create our emergency and disaster preparedness guides here in Galveston County, and we call it that for a reason, because it could be anything from fog season to hazmat, weather related. There's a whole bunch of different things that you really have to prepare for. And then I think it's important too, after an event, I'll take, my family for an example. I know when I got home after, we activated for the winter storm, my wife said, hey, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. So, we made changes to that plan so I don't get yelled at again next time. But really, understanding kind of what it was like without power when it was freezing. And Mark put it a good way too. Now just think of it, on the opposite. Now it's going to be extra hot, extra humid, no power, 110 degrees. So really, make your plan and build your kit, and not just for one single thing. Think how you could use it for multiple purposes, for power outages, winter weather, if you have to shelter in place, evacuate. Some really great tools that are out there. We help you build a kit on our website, some different links. I'm sure Harris County and Houston do the same as well.
Those are all great recommendations, and it's something that we needed to get to in this discussion. I would just say, like, can we just kind of open up a little bit more about the preparedness side of things, and like specifically, what would you recommend somebody do to prepare for a hurricane? You know, we've talked about the kit, we've talked about exercising the plan. And I will say, after Rita, it's going back, 15 years, we found out that most people didn't have a plan, and it's part of the reason why somebody saw their neighbor leave and they didn't know what to do. They didn't have a plan, so they jumped in the car and left, and we had a traffic jam because they hadn't really thought through, what is my plan when a major hurricane approaches? But, there's a few things on my mind that we haven't quite talked about that I know we have, in some of our guides. But, make sure this time of year you have adequate prescription drugs supplies, because you may have, you don't want to run out in the middle of hurricane threat where you can't get to a pharmacy. Always good to have extra cash and things like that. Anybody else have something on their mind that they like to remind people, what to do specifically to prepare right now?
I've got something. My wife and my in-laws are from New Orleans, and they were directly affected by Hurricane Katrina. And I'll never forget the Friday before the Sunday night and Monday morning that Katrina hit. I was able to get just about all of my relatives out of New Orleans, and they did bring some things with them, thinking they would be able to go back. And then, of course, they lost everything. But the things that they lost, that if they could do it all over again, they would make sure they had, are the important documents and the mementos, the family mementos. And I know that's not something that might keep you safe and alive in a storm, but my mother-in-law in particular, all of those pictures, all those family pictures weren't backed up at that time on a disk or in the cloud or anything like that. All of those were lost. And just a lot of things that her late husband, a lot of his artifacts that she had, I mean, that was all gone. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, that in addition to doing what you can to protect yourself and your family, try best you can to, protect those documents and mementos that you might have.
Yeah, Dave, that's very important. And I think that people need to, when they prepare now before a storm, is to scan those documents and put them on a thumb drive. Scan all your important information, have your insurance papers, take pictures of your driver's license. We had people come from New Orleans that had lost their wallet, had no ID. And if you take a picture of it, it's going to be helpful for you. I would take pictures of your house, inside and out. Put that on the thumb drive, because if something does happen and you might not be in the surge zone, but a tree collapses, your house catches fire, and you come back home and have nothing, it's hard to explain what existed and what you owned before you left. So document as much as you can. You can store it on the cloud. There's a lot of ways to do that. And then there are those mementos. And what things do you want to put in your car when you leave? You're not moving out, but you want to be able to save some things that are near and dear to you, your family. They might be heirlooms and other things, but you have to make the best decisions based on what you have. And what you have obviously is insured. And life safety is our first and foremost goal in our plans and processes. But you have to do the same thing for yourselves at your own homes, to take care of yourself, your family, and then to protect your property the best you can.
A couple things that I would add to that list. For those who do have medications, we always say about having backups, but also know what the medication dosage is. That's important. Also, I would say make sure there's somewhere that IDs what type of medical conditions you have. Often if people are sheltered or get separated from family members, their family members know it, but they don't may not be able to speak with you or tell you what's actually happening. The last thing I would say is on your cell phone, there's something called ICE in case of an emergency, so that if your phone is locked, someone can get to it to be able to call someone or a family member out of your phone. Update that. And then lastly, turn your alerts back on. A lot of times we get these silver alerts or amber alerts, and we've turned those off because they happen to go off at 3 a.m. and they've woken us up. But now it's hurricane season, and those particular alerts could be about the weather or flooding or some other important things that are happening. And you need to turn those alerts back on so that they can get you the information needed.
Yeah, I would add one other thing to all of this is that in your plans, make sure that you have, because some people will make a kit and it'll be a tote box or bag that's so heavy they can't pick it up. As we learned in Harvey, you may only be able to take with you what you can carry. And because of that, in my family, every member of my family, we have the same, it's a backpack, but it's like a hiking one. And we all have this, and as I've gone through there, we have 9 meals so we can take care of ourselves for 3 days. We have snacks for 2 days, all the things that are important that you can just literally grab and carry with you. So you have your medications that we were just hearing about. You have those family heirlooms that are important to you because you really have to make those decisions because you really can't carry very much. And that's why the practicing is also really important too. Do a practice run. Say, okay, everybody, we're evacuating in a half an hour, and see what happens. Those are the best experiences that you can do.
One thing that I'll add, and it's more on a lighter note, is if you can grab your laundry basket, that's where all your favorite clothes are, and I'm sure you're going to want that.
Yeah, that's definitely true for me, Mark. That's probably where I would go. Good point. Anybody else?
And one other thing I think I would add, Lance, is that, we have a lot of people in our community. Well, actually, we probably all fit into the category of having some kind of special needs. So whether it's kids that need toys and games, or you have medical equipment that you really need electricity for, or backup batteries for your hearing aids, or whatever you need to take care of yourself, you need to be sure you have a backup plan because we have a lot of folks that are dependent on certain equipment.
Let's not forget our pets either.
And that's the other thing is your pets. They have to have a kit as well. So you need to think about what your needs are and then make accommodations for that.
I completely agree, Jackie. And also maybe an extended family member that might need help. Think about what that person might need, or you might, have to help them with, especially if they have some kind of special need. Do you have that on hand that you could help them with that?
And then check on your neighbors. We have neighbors that are, don't have family or are in their 90s or can't get out, they're homebound or whatever. Talk to them about a kit and see if you can help give them some information to help get them prepared.
Yeah, I think we've got maybe a few more seconds, a minute. Anybody else have a final comment?
I'll just make a quick comment about generator safety. After a lot of these disasters, we see carbon monoxide poisoning. So remember to keep those in a ventilated area and use them in a smart way.
Don't get them as the storm is coming. You should practice. That is something I absolutely believe you need to practice before you ever have a disaster.
I would just say after the storm, make sure that you are going by to check on those family members. They might be telling you, I'm okay. Go by and physically see if they're okay. Additionally, look for with the debris, or if you see high water, don't wade in the water. I think there's a lot of safety tips that we're starting to focus on after a storm is passed and what not to do, because I think we do a lot to prepare ahead of it, but after it, there's a lot of things to be careful of: down wires, high water, just going back outside to check different things around the house, and just to be mindful of that. Even some critters. We've seen some interesting things on the news lately about alligators and things out there. So, even critters might be out there after a storm and been displaced. So just, be mindful of what happens after the storm and what you might encounter as well.
Thanks, Nikki. I think that's a great way to end our session. These are great tips. I hope everybody learned quite a bit tonight, and thanks for tuning in. I want to thank our panel. This is a great group of people, and they answered a lot of questions. So I hope we're all ready, and let's hope for the best hurricane season, and let's hope for no storms. But thanks again for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.